Hello once again, everyone. Welcome. A slightly later start tonight and a somewhat different format. Chris Waterman will be hosting the Q&A tonight with our guest, Charlie Sale, who will be answering questions about his new book, The Covers Are Off, Civil War at Lord's, which will be published on the 26th May 2021. If you wish to pre-order the book, you can do so at Wisdom Publications at a discounted price using the discount code MIOLP, which will become active from 7 p.m. this evening. So it's just become active. It's also available at Amazon and, as they say, all good bookshops. In a minute, I'll hand over to Chris, who will provide a proper introduction to our guests and take the first question. But in the meantime, may I please remind you all to make sure your microphones are muted unless you're asking a question. The first questions this evening come from Peter Hart. So Peter, would you be ready when Chris concludes his opening remarks? We may have time for a few additional questions, so if you would like to ask anything, please use a Zoom chat facility and address your questions to Chris, me or Paul Graber. If you want to join in the discussion anytime, please use the Zoom chat facility to let us know and we will try to bring you in. Or you could just wave and if we see you, we'll bring you in that way.
Got the sound in, get the sound on this.
If you do come in, please try to focus on the area under discussion. One final point, this session will be recorded and put up on the MCC-MIOLP YouTube channel. So if you do not want to be recognised, please turn off your video. Chris.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming and missing the 7 o'clock news. James said that I should make a proper introduction to Charlie, but the only introduction I can make is an improper one, in the sense that his main claim to fame is writing for the paper I read first every morning. I do that so that by the time I've read the quality papers, I've forgotten what the Daily Mail said. But to be serious for a minute, this book is a serious piece of research. It has been a while coming, and I know from the time that I spent with Charlie, and I can see several other people nodding, that Charlie was involved in the best interrogative manner when he spoke to me, and he improved after the 3rd bottle of red wine. So, Charlie, you can tell us about yourself, what you would like to in a few seconds, and then we'll move on to Peter Hart. Charlie.
Well, I don't really want to say much about myself because I'd rather just sort of talk about the book. But basically, as you said, Chris, I used to work for the Daily Mail before retiring in 2018. And before that, the Daily Express, so 2 good right-wing newspapers who are celebrating the Hartlepool by-election victory. Look, I know a lot of the guys who kindly sort of tuning in tonight. I'm really grateful for that. And hopefully they'll buy a copy of the book, which is just one quick promotion, as James said at the start. It's available on wisdom.com, especially for those members who don't like dealing with Amazon, and it's at a discounted price just for MIOLP members, and that's the discount code MIOLP. So that's enough about me.
Thank you. And you mentioned guys. In fact, there is one gal on tonight.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
So I think that probably means we're a cross-section gender-wise of fantastic. The MCC membership, damn it. But a particular welcome to Jane. And if she wants to chip in at any time, then I'm sure James will let me know of that. So, Peter, a couple of questions. Over to you.
Charlie, thank you for coming this evening. I've been looking forward to it. 2 quick questions. What made you write the book? And have you had any help or hindrance from the MCC Secretariat?
Well, thanks, Mark, for that. What made me write the book, as I just briefly mentioned, in 2018, I had to leave the Daily Mail. I wasn't sacked, although some people probably think I should have been, but I got quite badly ill. Fortunately, I made a recovery, but no longer had enough energy for the 7 days a week sort of toil at the workface in Kensington. But I still had enough energy for projects, and this is a book subject that I'd sort of dipped in and out over the last 20 years. Somebody suggested it, and I thought, yeah, it's great, provided. I was very keen that it was a balanced book, and so both sides were there. I didn't want it just to be a flag-waving operation for either side. And it's taken, well, I started research in April 2019, just before the Compton Edgeridge stand started, and now it's finished just as they have finished. So it's taken sort of, well, over 2 years from start to finish. But I had a standing start because I knew the subject. The second part was, have I had any help from the MCC Secretariat? The definite answer to that is no, not at all. In fact, Guy Lavender made it clear that he didn't want any of his staff to speak about it. Fair enough. When he took over, he made it quite clear that he thought the vote in 2017 was the end of the matter. But fortunately, although Guy might have stopped his current MCC Secretariat speaking about, a lot of people were prepared to talk, including a lot of committee members, past chairman, past lots of people, which has allowed the book to show both sides. I mean, I think I've listed them in the book, about 60 people agreed to interview, and I've also listed the people who didn't, who were quite interested, and there were about 30 odd of those. I mean, it's quite fair, but obviously, if you don't agree to be interviewed, it says quite a lot about you anyway, you know.
Okay, thank you. And another welcome to Katie. It's very good to see you, Katie. So, and I'm really interested to see, I think in most newspapers now, they put at the very bottom, whoever it was asked to comment. So really good. I'm agog to look at the list of people who said no. Thank you very much, Charlie. Is Philip Banham knocking about somewhere?
I am.
Now, Philip owns more Wisdons than I have ever seen, other than in a cricket library. So I don't know if you're going to delve into your archives, Philip, or ask something sensible.
Right, Charlie, good to see you.
I
mean, you've partly answered this. I was going to ask, what about the main figures in the saga? Did they engage with you? Thinking about, in particular, obviously, Charles Rifkind and Gerald Corbett, perhaps in two hats. One when he was chairman of Railtrack regarding dealing with the MCC, and then chairman of MCC dealing with Charles Rifkind. And other people, for example, Oliver Stocken, Sir John Major. Did you manage to speak to either of those? And so I ask another couple of questions while I'm there, if I may. How long did the research take, and where did it take you? And what about MCC documents? Were you given any access to them? I suspect from what you've just said, you weren't. But in my dealings with MCC, I know that they have a 30-year ruling as to MCC committee minutes, generally speaking, as to what can be seen, but I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. I know you're a great historian of the game. So the first thing we did, I get help from the people you mentioned. Yes, fortunately, all of those, but so John Major wasn't prepared to help, but a lot of the things that a lot of people who talked about him and the letters that he wrote were in the public domain about this subject were in the public domain. Charles Rifkind was very helpful, as was Oliver Stocken. I found both of them very plausible, very intelligent guys. They gave their point of view, and in fact, I've seen both of them more than once. So, you know, I put questions to them. They answered everything, and I couldn't have been more grateful for their help. Gerald Corbett was also very helpful. As for, you mentioned documents, I mean, I've been very lucky with documents. I received loads of them, and in fact, they're the best type of evidence, because they're sort of contemporaneous, that's the right pronunciation. They're the notes you can't argue with, and this is a subject of both sides. So I really did try and make a point of keeping to the facts, even to them going on and who said what in committee and whatever. I have seen lots of minutes from both sides. I mean, loads of people gave me stuff, which I'd never reveal who gave what, but there's plenty of documents in there. I mean, I wanted it to be not just a sort of my sort of view. In fact, I don't really figure much. I wanted it to be a sort of historical record of 20 years, which as you well know, the MCC members don't know anything about it. I mean, this has been an unplayed story. I mean, the bits and pieces, but considering the shenanigans that went on within the club, it's amazing the membership knows so little. I mean, obviously, a lot of the people who are listening tonight know a bit about it, but only a fraction of the MCC membership. This will come as news to them. If you think about it, I mean, the fact that the MCC didn't own the tunnels under Lords, although the auction took place in 1999, it wasn't until Ivo Tennant in 2008 actually made public that fact. I mean, it just kept under wraps. All this has gone on. We're talking so 150 million pounds. I mean, that was the amount of money at one stage that was offered to the club. The members were never. That's the main beef of the other side, that they were never given the opportunity to put their say. Whatever the final decision they reached, whether they wanted sort of development at Lords, you can quite understand if they don't. But what I think is scandalous is the way that the club never really gave the other side an opportunity to properly state their case. Although it was difficult for them, they would say they did. But does that answer both sides?
Yeah,
Philip?
do you want to follow that up, Philip?
I was just going to think about Keith Bradshaw. Did you manage to speak to him, and also perhaps to Roger Knight, who was the Secretary Chief Executive before him?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Keith, absolutely. I've also seen the draft documents of the book that was never published.
Yeah.
I've had access to that, and I've spoken to Keith. I spoke briefly to Roger Knight. He didn't really want to get involved.
Right.
I mean, he didn't want to get involved when he was in office, let alone with me. And I've had a few run-ins with him in the day job as well. But he was very polite, and at least he spoke, unlike some other guys.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Well, I'm looking for the book. Can't wait to get a hard copy and a soft cover copy as well. I can annotate the soft cover and keep the hardback pristine.
Fantastic.
And again, I'm going to order 2 copies, and I'm going to present one to the MCC library, Charlie.
No, that's good of you, Chris.
On your behalf, and I'm sure you'll sign that one.
Definitely.
To pick up one of the points you made, I can see that John Hegarty is with us. Do you want to say anything about proceedings, John?
Hang on, let me just bring Heggers in. You need to unmute yourself, John. There we are, John.
John, I mean, you're a keen chaser of proceedings, and Charlie, you just heard Charlie say how difficult things are to come by. What do you think about that particular aspect?
John, do you want to come in here? John Hegarty, you have been unmuted if you want to come in. No, should we move on?
You're unmuted, John, but we can't hear you. So maybe your mic's not on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
Well done. Well done.
Okay, sorry. I thought you'd taken over my mic and switched it on for me, but obviously not. Yeah, I think the observation is spot on. It's very, very hard to understand what actually goes on within our club. And we've got a couple of items on the agenda at the AGM, and I'll be talking to 2 of those. But, typical answer to an issue is, one, we haven't broken any rules, so there's nothing wrong. A straight question with a real substantive issue is hardly ever asked, and the conversation is closed down with I think we've covered everything now, and that's pretty much my experience.
Yeah, thank you, John, and I've been a keen student of the transcript of the AGM for the past 6 years, and you have to copy it out by longhand in the Deputy Secretary's office, and I was told that it would be illegal to give me a printed copy, and once I was caught taking photos with my iPhone, then somebody come and sat very close to me, and then lo and behold, the law appears to have changed, because this year's AGM transcript is up for everyone to read. So it's quite another interesting bit of extra information, Charlie. Okay, is Andrew Lloyd anywhere in sight,
Yeah.
James?
Yes, he is. He's there, Andrew.
Yep.
Andrew,
Can you hear
welcome.
me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Right. Charlie, with all your background knowledge you've acquired over the last 20 years, what do you think are the real reasons that MCC have failed to pursue any discussions with Charles to sort out the nursery end lease and the Grove End frontage houses since the MCC terminated the Vision for Lords?
It's a difficult question to answer. I mean, that's the sort of book tries to do that. And numerous things. Again, I think communication is over that 20-year period has been the worst thing about it all, because never were both sides sort of allowed to put their say, to the membership properly. So, I mean, when you got involved with sort of resolutions for independent inquiries, whatever, that you're sort of brought into the fold, and then there's so much of procedure. It has to be a resolution that the MCC agreed to. And as you know only too well, the MCC are bomb-proof at any resolution because they hold the postal vote. I mean, the only time they were defeated was John Fingleton's seat thing, and that was because the resolution was printed the wrong way round. And so the answer was no rather than yes. And vast majority of the membership, again, as you know, just probably go tick, tick, tick to the resolutions without even looking at them. So throughout this, I mean, MCC offer this unbelievable once in a lifetime opportunity for a residential, giving them the sort of money that allowed them to be an independent voice and not have to go cap in hand to the ECB for 2 tests a summer. But again, then do the membership want residential at Lords? I mean, it's difficult. Both sides have got a case. But what there should have been is proper communication between them. So the membership then were allowed to make a proper decision with all the facts at their fingertips. And that was never been the case. And one wonders in any debate going forward whether it'll be. I mean, you've seen just on the way the sort of the life membership thing was managed over. I mean, they do better than the Tory party in Hartlepool, the way they control the electorate and the way it's done. So it's very difficult to break through that. And I don't think the reforms that they said they're introducing will have any effect on that.
So the next question really is just from you: is how do you think the deadlock can ever be broken? Because you've got this so-called massive marriage value there to be taken on both Grove End Road and Nursery, and there seems to be no will at all from the committee, as opposed to Vision for Lords when there was a will on the committee.
Yes.
For this marriage value to be released. So there was a sea change of opinion on the committee at Vision for Lords. What do you think needs to be done now? How are we going to how do you think there'll ever be a sea change of this to break the deadlock?
Well, eventually it's a long game though, isn't it? We're playing, it's a long lease, it runs till 21, 32, whatever. I don't think it will be the current incumbents, that's for sure. Or maybe Charles Rifkin's sons. They're both highly intelligent boys who also been brought up with this subject, so they know it. So that'll be passed on to them, this feeling. They'll be well briefed and they'll know all the history of it. But again, the MCC over the last 20 years, it's been the same old type of people in positions. That'll have to change. I mean, you see that the new chairman who's taking over from Gerald is, he's already had one job that he took over. I think it's moneysupermarket.com. He took over from Gerald at that place as well. So it's a kind of chumocracy, as Chris Waterman likes to call it. But there's no sign soon of that ending. Although then again, you have a very competent chief executive, Guy Lavender, who's given a lot of more power than other chief executives. But he certainly doesn't want anything to change. So it'll take a lot of time. Maybe both of us might be long and gone before there's any.
Thanks very much for that. I hope not. Thanks. That answers the questions. Yeah.
Yeah,
Chris, do you want to come in next, Chris, or we've got Tony Curry who wants.
Oh
to
yes, please, yes,
and
Tony.
Also, then Peter Hart wants to come back for a follow-up. So should we do Tony next? Yeah.
Tony.
Thanks. Hi, Charlie.
Hi, Charlie.
Good for you to spend your time. I think I've already decided I'm going to get a copy of this book. It sounds far more interesting than I initially thought. I think you've partially answered what I'm going to ask here, but I'm always intrigued as to whether MCC has actually had any real vision as to what it wanted to do with the tunnels and the area under the ground. Do you think that they've really got any clear plan as to what they do if they could come to a satisfactory financial arrangement with Rifkin? All the proposals so far seem to have come from Charles. MCC doesn't seem to have provided much refinement or counter proposals. And one of the disappointing things for me is one of the real concerns when you're there for a day at Lord's is the congestion around the ground. I have this vision that maybe the tunnels could be used, accessed from the tunnels to create some sort of St Andrews cross under the ground for extra facilities, retail, offices, storage, indoor school, that sort of thing. Do you have an idea whether they've got that sort of idea, whether they've got any idea what they could do with those tunnels?
Well, as you say, Charles Rifkin certainly had the vision. All the things that you've mentioned there for the tunnels were part of the master plan, retail, end of the congestion and all that. He would have put an indoor school. That was all part of the vision. He certainly had a vision, but he's had the vision from the start. The MCC didn't have that vision. I mean, they purely saw it as a leasehold yield. That's why they bid so little at the auction, because they only saw it as, they didn't see any development possibilities. I mean, as Charles Fry, I think one of the former chairmen mentions in the book, he says, Charles was a very clever man. We just didn't have the vision. But they had, they've had 20 years to talk to him and come to an agreement which suits them both. I mean, that's obviously it's their ground. It seems a great pity that that's one of the great pities of the whole saga, is that you need two. You've also needed two to tango on this one because of the long lease, but they've never really talked. And Charles's vision has always been his vision, without even having the opportunity for the MCC to tinker it to suit because they never allowed him to come to the table properly. He's not been able to tweak it enough to suit them, or them to tweak it. Just they haven't talked. Certainly not since Keith Bradshaw was the only guy inside the MCC who sort of saw what Charles was trying to do. And unfortunately, as we all know, Keith left in 2012.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting, Charlie, because when I last visited Lord's to speak at the AGM, the new stands, and I think they're going to be called Facebook and Google. I think they've sold the naming rights. But what was interesting is that the new buildings could not be seen any longer because the new stands are blocking the view, and the Gubby Allen trees have gone, and so MCC has itself removed some of the key obstacles to agreeing to, a low-rise development.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the nursery ground, one of the reasons why they turned down over the years was that the nursery ground was supposed to be a sacrosanct as a full match place for a proper match play. But whether all that ever happens again very much remains to be seen. And if it does happen again, then the boundary rope will have to be right next to the wall, which sort of stymies any residential anyway. So,
but don't they play a game at Eton that involves the wall? Sorry, Peter.
Charlie, something that's always amazed me, and I'm glad Paddy's online this evening, because there was a thread called the Lord's Estate on the online pavilion. You just touched on it, that in 1999, when they were offered the tunnels, they only thought of whether they would how much rent they would save over the period. Is that absolutely true? So they didn't. That was their calculation. They didn't think of anything else apart from saving the rent. And secondly, last time I spoke to Tony Elgood, who I've known for many years, he was saying he would like the MCC to buy the tunnels. Do you think that is a realistic possibility, or is that just hypothetical?
Well, it's no point them buying the tunnels unless they sort of make the most of the development opportunities that they offer. I mean, there's £300 million worth of development there. They've got to come to an agreement with Charles to make it worthwhile. I mean, do you say they never ever saw the development opportunities? That's why they bid so little at the 2.2 million at the auction.
And before the auction, they were offered them for how much?
About half that.
Yeah, unbelievable.
I mean, they bid £1 million more at the auction as the underbidders that they offered Knight Frank's Rail Track's representatives in the months coming up to that. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
I don't know if Paddy, I know you want to make a contribution.
Sorry, Chris, before you go to Paddy, John Hegarty says he's got to leave soon, and he's got a question he'd like to ask.
Okay.
He's just said he needs to leave soon. So, Johnny, are you there? You need to unmute yourself, and you can ask your question. No. Okay. He's not there, so I'll ask it for him later. But in the meantime, let's bring Paddy in. Paddy.
Thank you, James. Charlie, first I'd like to say how absolutely delighted I am that this book is being published. I've tried to persuade one or two cricket and Lord scribblers over the years who are rather more able than I am to have a go at the subject, and they've backed away, and I'm delighted that you haven't, and I wish you well with it, and I'm happy to have offered some small assistance. So just to say that at the start. I come probably from the dark side as far as MCC is concerned, in that I actually tried to do something on one occasion, and between us, Nick Gandon and I got an SGM question, and were very much in the front trench, and that's it wasn't effective. But I'm in some fairly good company in my lack of effectiveness. I've been involved on and off for about 10 years. And if I look back, and I've only written a few names down here, but there are many others, some of whom are on this Zoom call, Nigel Knott, Tony Grabiner, Robert Griffiths, Mark Williams. They're not lightweights, those guys. All of them have significant and substantial contributions to make. Nick Gandon and I perhaps slightly less so, although I'm pleased Nick's now on the committee, Ian McGee and many others. So that's the little group from the grey side, if not the dark side. My question is, why, with the honourable exception of John Fingleton, and this has already been mentioned, by the way, I didn't know that the ballot paper was incorrect for John's triumph over the Warner stand. But anyway, it doesn't matter how you get there, he got there. But apart from Fingers, our protests, the lot that I mentioned before and others, have really had no effect. And the most extraordinary of all, John Major protested. He didn't do it in the way that some of the rest of us have, but that was a very significant event when he walked away. And even that didn't threaten the edifice one bit. So we've been at it for a while. Some of us, some of the others anyway, are deeply distinguished individuals. But above all, I think we all care. We didn't do it to be awkward. We didn't do it to be bloody minded. We did it because we saw the need for change, but we failed. Where have we all gone wrong, Charlie?
Well, it's a great question, Paddy, and you know more about this whole subject than almost anybody. I mean, I think you had no chance because of the way they control the postal vote. I mean, it's sort of pissing in the wind, really. I mean, all the resolutions, the SGMs, despite all the people who mentioned, sort of Grabiners, John Majors supporting thing, it was never a fair contest, because they were never allowed, even that SGMs that you mentioned, even going back to the one when Tony Grabiner's letter was read out by Simon Robertson. I mean, MCC control the set pieces. Nobody does it better than the MCC, the set pieces. You can see the way, even in the last one of the life memberships, they bring out the people just before to speak, the way they set up even the stage at some of those SGMs, sort of, they put all the people like yourself are up to one side of the stage, this big stage with all the MCC on one side, the committee, and the way they dictate things. And as you know far better than me, the majority of the MCC membership just put up their hand and support the committee. I mean, this is why I think this book I set myself is relatively important, because the whole thing is where a private members club. I mean, they're unique. They can do why should they be told what to do? They don't like that, because they are a private members club. But again, they're the public face of the most important cricket ground in the world. It's fascinating in that respect. And even people like yourself who fought so hard never really had a chance. I mean, even John Hegarty and Andrew Lloyd, I mean, they, after your SGM defeated, then the next one, the MCC sort of ingratiated themselves with the requisitionists, if that's the right word. And so it was framed, it wasn't an independent inquiry, it was an in-house inquiry. And we see the way that 2017 vote was set up. It was never a level playing field, in any shape or form. And that's the great tragedy about this. And all this is going on, as you say here. And all this will come as news to the vast majority of the members who really only care about coming to Lord's 3 or 4 times a year.
I agree totally with your analysis, Charlie, and I think the power is undoubtedly there. I mean, I haven't been sent to a gulag, and I'm still sort of alive and breathing, but I've never seen Stalinism at its more wickedly controlling. I read a biography of Stalin a few months ago, and there was a lot that resonated.
Thanks, Paddy.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Yeah. AG. Can you bring AG in, James?
Yes, I am. Yes, he's had his hand up. I've just asked him. You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
I have unmuted myself. It's Tony Grabiner. Oh, AG is Tony Grabiner. And I'm Charlie. I just want to say I am really delighted. I'm really delighted to see you this evening. I'm very pleased that you produced the book, and I cannot wait to read it. I'm slightly irritated you didn't send me an advance copy, but I'm sure you got it all right. A little earlier on, a couple of questions were asked. One is, well, what is the MCC game plan, and what is the thinking? What have they been doing all these years, and what is their thinking? I mean, I'd like to sort of venture a suggested answer to that question. First of all, I don't think that they do think in a very constructive way at all, and except that they want to do their damnedest to make sure that Charles Rifkind never comes out of this with a successful result from his perspective. And I think that that is a key motivation, I'm afraid, on the MCC side of the story. And I think that the reason for that is the history. It's already been sort of briefly adverted to, but what happened here, as almost everybody on this call must know, is that they were offered this site at a knockdown price, originally by Railtrack, and they refused it. They then they were rather grandly sent somebody to represent them at the auction sale, but put in a bid which could not be regarded as remotely serious. And that's how Charles secured the asset in the first place. But ever since then, and I mean, Charles did approach them quite early on in the story. I mean, Charlie Sale's book will have the detail. I don't have it to hand. But he did approach them with a view to opening a discussion and a proper negotiation. but they wouldn't play ball. And I think that what has been happening is that they are simply embarrassed by their own idiotic failure in the first place to secure this asset. I mean, can you imagine Lord's Cricket Ground or having any asset at all where somebody else is going to be owning a big slug of land within the perimeter of your own land? Why would you allow that to happen? I mean, I think this is a piece of very poor business, to put it very mildly. But I think they are embarrassed by that. And looking back on it, the exercise is simply an exercise which is designed to protect their predecessors who were engaged in the decision which led to that idiotic decision. And I think they're just embarrassed. And they're particularly embarrassed now on the basis that they now have potentially a partner, but it's going to cost them quite a lot of money, or in the sense that they're going to have to share any profit that's available as a result of any development that's done there. And they're very annoyed about that. And I must say, my experience of being on the original committee, which John Major was on as well with me and a number of others, that my experience of that committee was, although we were asked to identify a suitable developer who was going to do the work, we spent the first 7/8 of every meeting arguing about whether we should go any further. We were simply having a debate about trying to reverse the original decision of the old committee in order to decide whether or not we were going to appoint a developer. And we weren't going to appoint it, we were going to recommend a developer to the committee. But they simply frustrated the whole of that process. And so I'm afraid I think it's very, very basic and very simple and extremely short-sighted. I think they were simply in the exercise of doing their damnedest to cover up a very bad mistake made in 1999 and to ensure, so far as they can forever, that Charles Rifkin will never be able to do any development on this site. And what it reveals is that the governance arrangements at the MCC are frankly a disaster. Sorry to bang on for so long. I do hope that the way I've been summarising it, Charlie, finds its way, or has found its way, into your book, because what I've been saying is the truth.
Well, of all the people I interviewed, Lord Grabner was by far the most useful and the most controversial and the most well-reasoned. So there's a lot of Lord Grabner in the book, and what he has to say is fascinating. And the fact that the MCC sort of got him set says a lot about the whole process. Hopefully the book will be, I don't think it'll be sold inside the MCC, but I'm hoping, because you're involved with Surrey, Lord Grabner, that they might stock it.
I'm going to buy 100 copies, I promise you. And I'm going to distribute it to as many worthwhile people as I can think of, because this story needs to be made public, and it's not been so far.
A couple of points, please, before I bring Julian Shellard in. You mentioned the Gulag, Charlie. Well, 10 months ago, the MCC main committee agreed that I should be disciplined for chaining myself to the Grace Gate. They refused to hold a disciplinary, and they've refused to say whether there is a statute of limitations. So if you never see me again, the Gulag really does exist. And certainly in terms of your book, it will be sold at the Grace Gate before the start of the New Zealand game. And I have ordered sufficient copies to meet a small part of the demand on each of the 5 days. James, could you unmute Julian, or could Julian unmute? Could you unmute yourself, Julian?
I have been trying to get Julian unmuted. I had previously muted him, not knowing that he was going to ask a question. So here we go.
While we're waiting for Julian, apologise to Tony Grabner for not recognising him as he was at AG iPad. I've taken the liberty of renaming him. I hope that's okay. Julian, you need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. No?
Still muted, Julian.
While we're waiting for Julian, shall I read out John Hegarty's? He left a message before he went.
Yes.
He said he had to leave soon. I thought I could get him in time. He said, can somebody ask about Charles's inflexibility? Obviously talking about Charles Rifkin. Charles Rifkin's inflexibility on insisting on a 50-50 split when MCC's advice apparently has it that it should be 60-40 or 70-30, which was a barrier to a deal. Charlie, can you comment on that?
Well, that's part of the story, yeah. I mean, MCC's advisors, property advisors, thought that the split should be 70-30 or even 80-20. Charles is adamant it should be 50-50 because he saw in his development he was taking the risk. And that has been a barrier for the last 20 years. Charles still thinks it should be 50-50. MCC, if we ever get back to this thing, probably will come back at 75-25. That's a central part of the story. MCC felt one of the reasons why MCC said they couldn't, they turned for the vote. They actually announced Charles's team didn't want the MCC committee to recommend something before the vote, if you can remember, in 2017, because whatever MCC recommends, they the vast majority of their membership support. Joe Corbett says they couldn't recommend, they had to recommend the other side because their advisors were adamant that it should be a 75-25 split or 70-30. Charles remains a very big point with Charles. He thinks it should be 50-50. So, I mean, John's right. This was one of the major issues in the whole saga.
Thanks. Chris, sorry, we can see Julian there. He's got his headphones on, but he's not unmuting himself. Julian, could you please unmute yourself, then we can come in.
I have exchanged emails with Julian to try and get him in.
Yeah. Look, Chris, do you want to ask your question then, and we'll try and get Julian in later?
Okay, yeah, and this is a question that I'm asking on behalf of a couple of people who've raised it. Does your book cover, let me just get it in front of me, cover any of the issues to do with anti-Semitism, racial discrimination and misogyny? And was that part of your discussion with people?
Well, very much so, especially the anti-Semitism point of view. It's, I mean, Lord Grabiner, who we've had on, is pretty forthright about that. And so a lot of other people. Again, they say it's not so blatant. It's just a whiff of it. And they say that, you know, I mean, I go through the people who say it is, the people who say it isn't. It is a very much part of the story, but it's not blatant. I know, Chris, that you've been subject to sort of appalling sort of abuse inside Lords. It was never as bad as that, but a lot of influential people, we're talking about Lord Grabiner, Sir Simon Robertson, Sir Simon Elliott, say that it's very much part of the story, unfortunately.
Yeah. And you may or may not know, Charlie, but today I've launched a website called MCC's Invited, which is an anonymous reporting for women members and staff who have been badly treated at MCC. Again, following an exchange of emails with the Chief Executive Officer, who has point blank refused to even consider the severity of the problem.
Interesting.
So,
shall I ask? We've been looking for Max Sawyer, who's due to ask the next question, and I think he's been delayed. Hopefully, he'll join us later. Shall I ask his question for him, Chris?
Yes, please. And Max is, I mean, Max has made the classic error of umpiring a cricket match this evening.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a fairly good excuse, isn't it?
Yes, we'll let him off.
It's a good question as well from Max. He says, given the way the committee controls MCC and manages the elections, can you envisage a means of affecting real change?
I'm back online. Can anybody hear me?
Yes. Can we take Julian, actually?
Let's take Julian next. We'll come back to that one.
Quick, Julian.
No, I'll shut up. No, I barged in.
No, come on.
My point was, well, a number of points. I was a board member of CB Richard Ellis, who did the advice finally to the MCC about the development of Charles Rivkin's plan. I wasn't in the company at the time, I retired, but what I understand, allegedly, is that A, he had no money to do it, B, the costs of running the tunnels was colossal, and probably it was a very good idea that in the end the MCC did not get in to bed with him, if I may say it that way. Allegedly, I'm not trying, you know, I don't want to get in trouble on this. The idea is superb, and the loss of the trees and all the rest of it is a shame. And I think the notion of the development was superb, but I don't think it would ever have happened as I understand it. Don't pin me on this one at all, please. It's hard to express how we could develop the ground on our own resources, which is what we're doing now. And as far as I can see, the Compton and Ederich look superb. I haven't been there, but I think we need to be very careful about what we say. What I understand is that Oliver Stocken, when he was treasurer, when it was offered at, I understand, 1.9 million, before it went to auction, and it was auctioned the leasehold by Jones Lang Wootton at the time. It was offered to us at 1.9 million, and Oliver Stocken, I think, said he couldn't afford it. We couldn't afford it. And I think he said that in an AGM. Now, I haven't got the minutes of the AGM, but I think that's what he said. Now, you could go into the Allen Stand bar at lunchtime and say, "Hi guys, we're short of 2 million quid." And you'd get it if you'd explained it properly. So something went wrong there. That's the problem. And that's where, in my view, this cover-up had started. Now, the other thing I think is that the committee is a revolving door of some seriously incompetent people who were very good at first-class cricket, but not very good at running a business. And what's happened is that Gerald Corbett's turned up, who is a serious businessman, but has managed to exclude, in my view, the members of MCC. And it's now manifested itself in NOMCO, where there are 5 members of the MCC committee and appointees, and 4 members of the members. So it is still controlled by the committee. Shall I just keep quiet now?
Charlie.
Blimey, there's about, you should have written the book yourself, Julian, I think. What's going through that?
Charlie, I really enjoyed all your columns in the Evening Standard as well, which you didn't say anything about.
I didn't work for the Evening Standard.
I thought you did, didn't you?
No.
Did I get that wrong? Was it the Mail?
Yeah, that was George Osborne.
No, George Osborne. No.
I mean, a lot of the things
It was the Daily Mail. It was the Daily Mail, Charlie. I'm sorry.
I mean, a lot of things you said there were either factually right or hearsay or factually wrong.
Well, a combination of all three, I would say.
Which is basically sums up the whole thing. Just 2 points. Oliver Stockton wasn't treasurer at the time. He subsequently said they couldn't afford it. I mean, MCC said they couldn't afford it at the time because they just built the.
No, I'm sorry, Charlie. Could I just stop you there? When asked a couple of years ago, Oliver Stockton, I think, was chairman or treasurer at that time.
Yeah.
Who said that they couldn't afford it?
Yes.
I can't remember who was.
Yes, I mean he said. I mean he was a treasurer designate in 1999.
Can you genuinely believe that the MCC couldn't afford 1.9 million pounds?
Well, as we said earlier in this session, I mean they only saw it. They didn't see the development possibilities. They only saw it as the saving the rental and what yield that rent would have.
Yep.
So they didn't see. It's only Charles who saw the development side of it.
I mean, I'm a property man. This is the most incompetent thing I've ever seen in property. The ground rent being payable to Network Rail will go through the roof because it's linked to a value that relates to car parking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Car park, right?
Yeah. Well, it goes up every 5 years.
It astonishingly goes up, but by huge amounts of money.
Well, it actually hasn't gone up by huge amounts of money because the arbitration has gone up less than Charles Richmond once, but more than the MCC one. I've gone to arbitration every time for the last 3 or 4 times at vast expense.
So you know better than I. What's the current rent on that piece of land?
180. But beg me if I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay,
I think
all right, roughly
150,000 a year. A bit more now. The last one.
In 5 years' time, that's going to be enormous.
Well, yes, it will. Yeah. Well, it goes up. It can only go up one way. That's the thing. And
it's an upward-only rent review, and it's based on a car parking value. And more and more car. Well, I don't know. Sadiq Khan may actually have killed that. I don't know. But the fact is, there's an awful lot of rubbish being talked about this and what should have been done, and the MCC are negligent in the fact that they did not buy that leasehold interest.
Yeah, sure.
In 1999.
Okay.
One thing you said, Julian, that Charles didn't have the money. I mean, let me tell you, he certainly did have the money. But a lot of MCC people say during the thing said they didn't believe he had it, but he had the money. He's been a hugely successful property developer, and every deal he's done, he's delivered on.
Charlie, Lord Grabner has been very patiently just waiting.
Okay, and then Paddy again.
Yeah. That's very kind. A lot,
Tony.
as I think Charlie said a little earlier, a lot of what Julian said is quite correct. But the suggestion, which I appreciate, was hearsay, that Rifkin did not have the money is rubbish. I mean, I'm not familiar with the detail of Rifkin's assets, but I do know 2 things. First of all, the value of that land is such that he could easily have raised serious money from funders by reference to that real estate value if he didn't have any resources, although I actually think he had great resources. He'd also have an excellent relationship with the developer that we chose. Can you remind me the name, Charlie? The developer that we recommended to the committee, who was that?
Bear with me a second. Starts with a name. Almacanter.
Almacanter. You see, Alma Cantor has done that massive development on Marble Arch on the corner there.
Yeah.
And lots of other major real estate developments. They've also done Centrepoint. I mean, you're talking like the top developer in London, probably in the UK and possibly even in Western Europe at the moment, backed with, you know, massive resources. And they were on board for this job. And they were our recommendation as the committee, as the developer for the MCC for this development. So I know they were putting the word around, or it wouldn't be beyond them to put the word around that Rifkin didn't have the money, but it was rubbish. And the other point as well, of course, which I think Julian made very clearly, is that it would have been very simple for them to improve their bid at the auction. An organisation like the MCC could raise the appropriate £2.5 million or whatever it was, would have been well within their capacity. I completely agree with Julian on that.
Does Paddy want to come back in, James?
Paddy, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, just very quickly, building really on what Tony Grabner was saying. One of the tactics that the club pursued pretty much throughout this, certainly through my involvement, was to characterize the thing as binary. In other words, you choose this or you choose this. And I remember standing up at the general meeting and saying something like, do you not realize that in the real world of business, every negotiation moves along a continuum from, you know, ooh, we don't like that very much, to, oh my God, you're gonna bite your hand off if you offer me that. In other words, there is a range of outcomes and the negotiation determines the outcome that is acceptable to both parties. So that's what I said at the general meeting. And of course, Charles's money and all the other details of the thing were not binary. You know, everything was negotiable and the club refused to negotiate. That is the sort of hard fact of the matter.
Thanks, Paddy. I think John Fingleton is trying to get in, James.
Before that, we've got actually a question from Mark Carden, who's
sorry, yes, sorry, Mark.
Oh, hi. I thought I'd ask a question a bit different from the kind of rehashing of the content of the book, the content that the book addresses. I wanted to ask about the publication process, Charlie. So, I mean, I see it's published by Mensch Publishing. Did you write the book and then look desperately for someone who was going to put up the money to publish, or did Richard Sharkin collude with you on making this a topic of interest that he wanted to get behind as well? If that's not asking you to be indiscreet.
No, not at all. It's a nice question. I mean, I wrote the book without having a publisher. It was never a money-making thing for me. It's more of something to do, lockdown and recovering from illness and stuff. So I wrote the book, and then I had an agent who called Jonathan Lloyd of Curtis Brown, and he found Richard Sharkin and Mensch Publishing. Obviously, it's a niche book, but I couldn't be more delighted with working with Richard Sharkin, who's a fantastic guy, lover of cricket, big involver with Wisden and Bloomsbury. And the book's been beautifully, in my opinion, he's done a brilliant job, so professional throughout the whole process. I mean, the last sort of 5 months have been the sort of process of, which I knew nothing about, sort of producing a book, and the detail he's gone into is sensational. I'd love to work with him again if I had the choice. But Mensch Publishing is, it's a small publishing firm, but it certainly punches its weight.
Fingers, I think, would like to come in now.
I wanted to make a point. Thank you very much, James and Chris. I wanted to make a point, nothing to do with questions and back to Charlie, but one or two of you have been kind enough to comment on the way to win a resolution at the MCC AGM. And it was not my doing that it was in the yes as opposed to the no column. But I think they realised that might have been a technical a tactical mistake on their part. But as it happens, I won that one from memory about 72 to 28%. But then the following year, I had the same resolution in relation to the then proposed redevelopment of the Southernstone. And I won it again, but mind you, I had crashed out down to only about 69% that time, I think. But it can be won, but I'm really very hopeful that this year's resolution 8, despite all the committee health warnings, because it's a yes column vote to win it, will probably, not probably, but have a similar chance of getting through if people just go straight down the list ticking the yes boxes. So that's my hope for that and any other resolutions that might be brought up now or in the future. But I hope, seeing Guy Curry and Tony Elgood on board, maybe they'll get wise to that, which is rather irritating.
I think it's worth pointing. I think it's worth pointing out, Charlie, in case you don't know, that on the voting paper there is actually a direction from the committee to vote against Resolution 8, which a lot of members have. I mean, I think that's appalling. I try not to get involved in these political committee club things, but I think actually to tell members on the committee on the ballot paper itself how to vote is really appalling.
Well, as I said earlier, they're masters of the whole electoral process, aren't they? They manipulate it brilliantly.
Usually, yeah. Usually. If James, following Finger's success, I think on Friday of this week, I will be launching a special general meeting motion to improve NOMCO by increasing the membership of NOMCO to 10 with 6 directly elected members. And I think that as long as I can Farrer-proof the wording, then I think there might be some traction in the members taking control of NOMCO.
No, I think it's also worth saying that a lot of members, me included, have sympathy for the committee who have to face an awful lot of hostile resolutions from members, which is a waste of time and annoys them intensely. My only point is that I think if the committee feels strongly about something and they argue it well enough, they will win the resolution. What I think is totally out of order is starring committee members, which they did a few years ago, that they want to have elected to the committee, and also putting on the ballot paper itself, rather than relying upon arguments, how the members should vote. That is really, really poor. I have to say, I mean, Chris is a very good friend of mine. I admire him for a lot of things. I don't support many of the things he's doing because I think it's counterproductive to fire too many bullets at the same time rather than picking your targets carefully. That's all I'm going to say on the matter, because I do try and keep, because I'm running an independent members forum, I like to remain independent on almost everything, but I just feel I need to say about the ballot paper, in my view, that's entirely wrong. I will keep quiet now. Charlie.
Okay. And just to say, James, that people who shoot pheasants use a lot of shot. But anyway, enough of that. Charlie, any last comments, or are there any other questions? Are there any other people that want to come in? We are up to time, but because Charlie's doing it for free, we can afford to give him a few more minutes. Any other questions? Okay, well, Charlie, what last few words from you?
Sorry, Chris, did you want to we never actually got around to answering Max Sawyer's question, did we? I've just remembered we were cut off.
Oh, sorry, yes. Do you want to ask it again, please?
Should we do that as a last one?
Yes.
Max Sawyer, who I still don't think is around at the moment, has asked me to ask on his behalf, given the way the committee controls MCC and manages the elections, can you envisage a means of affecting real change?
That's a good question. Not in the way it's currently set up, even with NOMCO, even with the new reforms, because basically the MCC still control the process with the postal votes and with all the things we've said. The whole book, the whole 20-year saga really sums up the way the MCC work and whether that's the right way or not. Bear in mind, as you said, it's a private members club and they can do as they want. But they're in this sort of invidious position of also being the public face of Lords and all that entails. It's very difficult, but I can't see anything changing. I mean, although, as you say, people like Chris fight the good fight, but they can continually get sort of beaten off by the MCC machine, and the MCC machine keeps on revolving in its own way, and that's part of the fascination, I suppose.
Okay, well, if I could thank Charlie and somebody I've been watching very closely, Richard Norman. He's not in shot. Yes, Richard, I notice you've been drinking white wine from a very high quality glass. So what I would like to do, and I'm afraid this vin is so ordinaire, I do better to pickle onions in it, but I'd like to propose a toast to Charlie.
Thank you.
To wish him well, to wish him lots of sales, which I will help with.
Right.
And also, I'd like to thank James. James and I have known one another probably for 20 years. We disagree on alternate days, and James is always right and I'm always wrong. But I think you've done a great job with this series. Thank you for hosting this one. And I'll let you have the last word, James, about next week.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you again, Charlie, for a most entertaining evening. And thanks to everyone who's asked questions tonight and all who have been able to join us. So if I may conclude by reminding you of our two final guests, which will end our 2021 lockdown series of Q&As. Next Monday at the usual time of 6 p.m, we'll be joined by Mike Brearley. And we conclude the season with a very special guest, Michael Holding, on Friday, the 28th May, again at 6 p.m. So I hope to see you all again then. In the meantime, thanks again to Chris, and thanks very much to Charlie, everybody else. Stay safe and well. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Good night.